relationship of forces and the consciousness of lots of people. So what they're thinking of now doing, basically the people they have got for a provisional government are essentially businessmen. Libyan businessmen who've been working here in the States or in Qatar or in Abu Dhabi or hanging out in other parts of the Arab world, and they're collecting them to try and put them and create a provisional government. But if the truth be told, I mean, as those of you who know my work know that I've been mocking and attacking Gaddafi for years, but the people on the ground in Benghazi, it's the stronger center of the Islamists, which is fine. I don't mind that. I mean, if they're going to be elected democratically, so be it. You have to deal with it. And Gaddafi crushed a huge Islamist uprising there about 6 years ago and killed, according to the reports I got at the time, about 2,000 people. No one muttered a word of protest at the time because this was at the height of the war on terror. So anyone who was killing these guys was good. But now it's bad. And I think we have suffered my feeling is that we have suffered a defeat. The Libyan people have suffered a defeat because the choices are now awful. Then we come to Syria. And here you have a huge mass movement now, trying to topple the regime. The regime has carried out huge repression in Syria. And the fight goes on. They haven't won by any means. And they know that the scale of the opposition is huge. And here what is interesting is quite a few journalists who should know better have been saying that the principal opposition to Assad is coming from Islamists, which is bullshit. I mean, the opposition in Aleppo and Damascus is led by secular leftists, if you want to know the truth, because what is very interesting about Syria is that unlike many other parts of the Arab world, say Iraq or Iran, not that it's part of the Arab world, but a country in that region, lots of left people, intellectuals, socialists, left. They just couldn't face it. In Syria, they didn't leave. Very few Syrians, relatively, went into exile. And one of the legendary figures of the Syrian left, a dissident communist called Riyad al-Turk, was locked up in prison, tortured, they pressed him to renege, to join the Ba'ath. He refused to do it. He said, kill me. For some reason, they didn't kill him. Surprising, but they didn't. I mean, there are quite a few people they didn't kill, thank God. And he is one of the underground leaders of the resistance now in Damascus, and others like him in Aleppo. In Hama and Homs, you do have an Islamic groups which are strong, but it's a very large united front now to try and get rid of this regime. Whether they will succeed or not, I don't know. But even if Assad wins this round, he's now completely and totally discredited. But the fact is that we are talking about a world which everyone assumed was a world just completely locked, stasis. Nothing was going to happen. And now all eyes are on this world. I mean, the Israelis are, of course, in a total state. Because ideologically, they used to say that we are an oasis of light in this heart of Arab darkness. We're the only democracy. That can't be said now, and they know it. And the number of people, you know, I was at a union college in Schenectady yesterday, and the number of young people who said to me, you know, sort of a pro-Israel, quite wanting to know, and they said, but someone actually asked me a question last night at Schenectady saying, but don't you think that this sort of rising democratic tide is dangerous for Israel's security? But you know, they ask because this is what they've been taught. that this is for us the central issue. I said, why should it be? On the contrary, it might educate young Israelis to see, look, the Arab world has people fighting for democratic freedoms and getting rid of despots. And isn't that a good thing? I said it actually is very positive because they won't be able to control the impact of it even within Israel. So and he said, but doesn't... I said, who threatens Israel? It's a nuclear state, for God's sake, as the sixth largest army in the world. No one's going to invade it. They're not crazy people. But the important thing is this, that this notion which became very common after 9/11, which I heard of so many different parts of Europe and America, but the real problem is that the Muslims don't like democracy, which was always a farcical notion. And then when you attack them, they said, but look at the Arab world. And one would say, it's the Arab elites backed by the West who don't allow people the chance to vote. It's not people themselves. So that big argument that was used has been taken away again. Now, we are, I think, in the first phase of this movement is over. And we've seen what it's yielded, victories in Tunisia and Egypt, attempts to row back in Egypt, but in difficult conditions, continuing struggles in Yemen and Syria, repression and pogroms of Shias in Bahrain, and who are the bulk of the country, the majority of the population, and the poorest people in the country. Jordan is uneasy. I mean, virtually during this, the uprisings, the majority of Jordanian tribes, not the Palestinians, interestingly enough, the bulk of the Jordanian tribes came out and said they wanted to get rid of the king. Unheard of. Huge marches in Amman with former generals participating. Because people feel this is the time. We can do it too, maybe. So what is going to happen is unpredictable, to be perfectly frank. I think the West is trying to get the situation back under control, but it's not going to be that easy. I mean, in Egypt, there's a huge demonstration outside, not huge in terms of what we've seen, but a demonstration which was previously never possible on the day of the Nakba outside the Israeli embassy in clashes with the police. These will probably grow. But the big thing is what is going to happen within the army, because the people who collaborated with Mubarak for 40 years, like this joker Tantawi, I mean, he's in his 80s now. And, the laws of biology from that point of view are on the side of the Egyptian people. And the others will be affected by what is going on. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, one gathers, watching American television and reading the American press, that despite all these things, and despite a war in Afghanistan going very badly, actually a huge victory has been won. That's the big impression, that there's somehow been a huge victory in the fact that Osama bin Laden has been killed. And the world is now a more peaceful place. That is what European and American politicians are telling everyone. Now look, there are a few points which need to be made about this, especially in this country. But I know the American president, after 9/11, the powers that were passed, has legal rights, according to the US law, to target anyone he thinks is an enemy of the United States, wherever, and kill them. But the rest of the world doesn't quite see it like that. And many of us have been arguing for ages that the way to deal with people who carried out or ordered the attacks of 9/11 is legally, due process of the law. Try them in a court of law, provide the evidence. That's the way to move forward. This operation in Pakistan has now created a huge crisis in the region. the aspects of the crisis are very clear. I mean, I pointed out in 2006, in my last book on Pakistan, that there was very little doubt that Osama bin Laden was in a safe house somewhere in Pakistan. The reason I did this was not that I had any, I had a dream one day, but I had a talk with a senior intelligence guy coming on a plane from Lahore to London, who was an acquaintance of my youth. And I said to him, is he dead or is he in a safe house somewhere in our beautiful country? And he said, he's not dead. So I said, So in other words, he's in a safe house. So he more or less, I said, when you say nothing, I'll assume it's true. And so he said, yes. I mean, he nodded. So I said, well, where is he then? So at this point, he burst out laughing and said, I don't know. And even if I knew, do you think I'd tell you? I said, no, but you wouldn't tell me. But if you're telling me he's in a safe house in Pakistan, I mean, am I seriously to believe that if I know this fact, according to you now, thanks to you, the United States doesn't know it? And he said, they know. So I said, and so, what do they want? He said, they want him dead. So I said, okay, so you're not going to give him dead? He said, no. I said, do they know the location? He said, I don't know. There are 3 or 4 people in Pakistan who know the location. I more or less named them and he nodded. So I said, fair enough. So if these guys know, and you're confirming to me that they know, the Americans are that dumb, their intelligence services, they don't know this. He said, no, everyone knows, but we're not, no one knows, he said the Americans don't know where the location is. Of that I'm sure. But they want him dead. So I said, so you're not going to hand him over? And he said, very bluntly, this, we were talking in our own language, and at this point he talked in English. He said, why should we kill the goose that lays the golden eggs? By that meaning the billions of dollars in aid, armaments, help. So I said, well, what if they threaten to take away the nuclear facility? He said, then we'll kill him and hand him over. No, it's a cynical conversation, but that's what he said. I wasn't convinced at the time. I thought maybe he's sending me up. After all, it's quite a serious thing to say. But it clearly was the truth. I mean, I certainly published it. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone that this was taking place. Now, so you take him out. He was unarmed. First you say he was armed. The second story, unarmed. Shoot him dead. A senator describes the grisly photographs, which really sound horrific. So he could have been taken alive, decision to kill him, and then throw his body into the sea. And it's a stupid thing they did. It would have been better if they'd said, from their point of view, we buried him somewhere, according to Islamic rites, somewhere in secret, and we're never going to reveal his grave, what they did when they killed Che Guevara. Not that this guy is like that, but the operation was, targeting an individual. Now, this fact that his body was dumped into the sea has antagonized huge numbers of people, including all the people who loathed bin Laden in the Arab world and elsewhere, because people see this as as sacrilege almost. And I was thinking about this, and I then sort of remembered that the burial of bodies and not permitting the burial of bodies is something which goes very deep in all cultures. And I remembered the famous play written by Sophocles, 2,500 years ago this year, Antigone. And I picked up a copy from a second-hand bookshop in New York the other day and was sort of rereading it. I hadn't read it for ages. And the debate is very strong on this question, and I just want to read it to you to show that this is not even anything particularly to do with this particular religion. but desecrate